disorder. You're told you have a personality disorder. You're told you have a mental illness. You don't have any of those things. You have a nutrient deficiency. The real pandemic is what happened to humanity because we weakened everyone's immune system. Most people are not living healthier, happier, longer, more fulfilling lives for what we call modifiable risk factors.
I want to know why people can't lose weight.
One thing goes wrong that causes everything. I get a lot of flack for this, but
this is going to go crazy on TikTok.
Gary Brecka, we've wanted you on this show for a while now. We've harassed pretty much everybody we know that knows you. Glad you're here. What was the turning point that made you realize our genetics hold the key to unlocking better health and longevity?
You know, it was interesting. It wasn't initially the genetics that I uncovered as the key to longevity. It was that I realized that nutrient deficiencies, I was watching in thousands and thousands of blood labs that I was seeing when we were doing these analyses for life expectancy. I would see the same nutrient deficiency lead to the same diseases and the same conditions. And initially my fascination was, what if we just fix the nutrient deficiencies in these people? Like, you know, the number of people that were misdiagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, for example, just to you know, use one as an example. I would say, you know, the physician didn't even do any SED rates or you know, didn't look for rheumatoid factors. They actually just diagnosed them based on their symptoms. And the symptoms that parallel rheumatoid arthritis also parallel chronic D3 deficiency. And sometimes when I would go into our model and I would say, this database I had access to had 371 million lives. And I would say, what if I fix the D3 deficiency? You would see, boop, the life expectancy extend. You would see that the joint pain would go away. You would see that they're on methotrexate or another pharmaceutical for a condition that they actually didn't have. Because if you parallel the symptoms of a lot of nutrient deficiencies, you will see that they are superimposable with so many diseases and pathologies that people get diagnosed with. And so initially my fascination was, wow, this woman has anemia, chronic anemia, for example. And I would see it in her record for 10 years, and you would see they were applying the same treatment. They were applying folic acid, B12, and iron, folic acid, B12, iron, folic acid, B12, iron, which normally works. And I was like, why isn't it working in this person? Why isn't it working in this person? And then all of a sudden they would switch to a different nutrient like methylfolate, and bang, the anemia would heal.
So they had the gene that...
And it turns out that it was the genetics that were underlying that. You know, like the most common gene mutation in the world is called MTHFR. It's affectionately called the motherfucker gene. Can we say that on the show? Okay. We can say motherfucker on the show. Okay. All right. It stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, but essentially this gene mutation is very common. 44% of the population has it. Caucasians, about 60% of the Latino population has it. It's very prevalent in women. And essentially what this gene does is it codes for the conversion of something called folic acid or folate into the form the body can use, called methylfolate. Okay, so it takes a raw material we put into the body, folic acid, or folate from vegetables, and it converts it into the form the body can use. And I think the most overlooked thing in all of modern medicine, truly, is that everything that enters our body, without a single exception, there's not a single compound known to mankind. There's no vitamin, mineral, amino acid, there's no protein, there's no nutrient of any kind that we put into our body that is used in the form that we put it in. So without an exception, everything gets converted into the usable form. So I always use the example that we pull crude oil out of the ground, right? But you can't take crude oil and put it in your gas tank because the car doesn't understand that fuel source. So what happens is we take crude oil, we refine it into gasoline. Now the car understands the fuel source. Human beings are no different. For example, if you take in folic acid is useless. So first of all, folic acid is an entirely man-made chemical. It doesn't occur anywhere naturally in nature. You can't find it anywhere on the surface of the earth. We make it in a laboratory. But aside from that, when you put folic acid into your body, it's useless until your body converts it to methylfolate. Now the body understands the fuel source. So what if you can't make this conversion? Well, then you have a deficiency. And what does that deficiency lead to? It leads to some of the most common ailments that we suffer from as mankind. If you're a woman and you are a young woman and you're going to get pregnant or you get pregnant, the very first thing your OBGYN is going to tell you to do is take high doses of folic acid. high doses of a synthetic man-made chemical that you cannot find anywhere on the surface of the earth, that does not come from nature, that is the most prevalent nutrient in the human diet. And they're going to tell you to take high doses of this to prevent a neural tube defect in your infant. The truth is folic acid doesn't prevent anything.
Why did they start prescribing that ingredient or that supplement?
So what happened was we had a pandemic of neural tube defects in newborn infants. And so they did some research and they said, what's causing these neural tube defects? And it was a deficiency in a nutrient called methylfolate. So instead of giving methylfolate, there's a very cheap version of it called folic acid, which is an entirely man-made chemical. And again, it doesn't sound like a big deal until you realize folic acid in the United States is the most prevalent nutrient in the human diet. It is sprayed on all of our grains, all of our cereals, all of our pasta, all of our flour, all of our rice. But we don't call it sprayed with folic acid. We call it fortified or enriched.
If you see that on something yourself, do you avoid it like the plague?
Like the plague.
Okay.
Like if you want to see behavioral changes in your kids, if you have anxiousness, anxiety, or any gut-related issues at all, and we should go into gut issues because I think the most overlooked thing in all of bariatric medicine.
Don't worry, we have about 6 pages of notes for you.
Oh, you do? Okay. is the pace of the gut, right? I mean, we always think about the gut flora and the bacteria, and we think about food sensitivities, we think about food allergies. But there's people listening to this podcast right now that are like, listen, I've done everything. I've done every food sensitivity test. I've done every food allergy test. I've gone on the carnivore. I've had my gut microbiome tested. I take probiotics. I take prebiotics, and I still have IBS, or I still have these gut-related issues. I either have gas or bloating or diarrhea or constipation or irritability or cramping, and it drives me crazy because I can eat the same thing on Monday and be fine, and eat the exact same thing on Wednesday, and I'll blow up like a tick. It's because it's not related to what you're eating. It's related to the pace of the gut. It's related to the speed of the gut. You have to think of the intestinal tract as we're like getting right into bowel movements. I love this. Love this show.
Bowel it up.
Like we've already said motherfucker, and now we're talking about the bowel. So like,
Nice to meet you, Gary.
nice to meet you guys too. we're best friends now. Think of the intestinal tract, the human intestinal tract, as a 30-foot long conveyor belt. Okay, so we put contents on it at one end, right, as they exit the stomach, and it's going to travel 30 more feet before it exits the rectum. Well, just like any factory that works on a conveyor belt system, if you went into that factory and you just doubled the speed of the conveyor belt, you would see the whole line break down. If you pause the conveyor belt, if you reverse the speed of it, if you cut the speed in half, you'd have all kinds of problems in this assembly line because it's meant to run at a certain pace, right? So if you change the pace, you break down. So in other words, contents can putrefy, too much water can be resorbed, constipation, too much water can be added, diarrhea. You can have contents pause and putrefy, in which case you're going to get bloating, you're going to get gas. In some cases, you can get paralytic bowel and severe cramping. But it's not related to what you ate. It's not related to your gut microbiome. It's related to this deficiency in methylfolate, because methylfolate has a very strong impact on the motility of the gut. Methylfolate is also involved in the production of neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters, which are made in our gut. You guys probably know 90% of the serotonin in our bodies is right here, right? So it's in our gut. So if you don't have it here, you can't have it here, which is why in 150,000 genetic tested patients that came through our clinic system, I didn't see a single client that reported suffering from anxiety that did not also have gut issues. Not once. Because the same nutrient deficiency that slows down and interrupts the pace of the gut is the same nutrient that converts tryptophan into serotonin. We make neurotransmitters, right? We make them from amino acids. So for example, dopamine's made from tyrosine, phenylalanine. But if you don't have enough of the amino acid tryptophan, you don't have the raw material to make serotonin. If you do have enough of the amino acid tryptophan, but you're deficient in methylfolate, you won't convert that tryptophan into serotonin. And now guess what? You're deficient in serotonin. So then what happens? You don't have the serotonin in your gut, so you can't have it in your brain. And now any mood or any emotional state that requires serotonin